Welcome back to Crafting with Pink Foam. I am Bill Allen, and in this part we're going to continue on with our Arctic, icy, frozen tundra kind of terrain. Now, if you saw the last couple episodes, we started off with some experimentation because, as I like to point out, crafting is all about learning. It's about learning, and it's particularly this kind of crafting is about learning how to make stuff for your tabletop games. So I've never played Frostgrave, but I see a lot about it online. People always making these cool terrain pieces and dioramas and stuff, and it looks really amazing. But I've often thought that it would be cool to have some frozen north kind of Arctic tundra terrain for any kind of game, really. It could be fantasy, D&D, whatever. Maybe you play a Game of Thrones kind of thing and you want to have something that represents north of the wall. Or even sci-fi, post-apocalyptic. Sky's the limit, because the nice thing about this kind of scatter terrain is it's not genre specific. You could use it in a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Maybe you're on an expedition and you uncover this deep frozen cave where these ancient otherworldly alien races have hidden away from humans for eons. Who knows? Anyway, started off doing a couple different things with these pieces. Some of them I based in just blue, some of them I did gray, some of them I did white. And then in the second part, I kind of didn't like how vibrant the blue was, so I went over it with a grayish blue, still let some of the white poke through. So I've got these kind of bluish gray pieces, and I know for sure that the next step is going to be hitting them with my highlights. So we're definitely going to hit the highlights today. But before we do that, I did these little guys in gray. They don't have any blue in them really. So I'm going to do an experiment, one more experiment before we get into the highlights. I'm going to leave these guys here because they're dry. But these big, giant pieces that I was intending to use as kind of, really big ledge pieces, where I could either put them together with kind of a fissure in the middle, and, if you're not careful, you don't make your dex save, you might slip into this fissure and then, fall into a frozen whatever. Or I could use them as kind of like, border pieces where, there's maybe a big frozen lake, and then these are kind of the rims of the lake, so, but either way, they're really big pieces. And part of me thought maybe I'd just snap them in half to make them smaller, but let's just keep them big for right now. So here's my idea. I'm going to go with a gray base on these, and just while it's wet, I'm going to hit some spots with some blue, okay? And then we'll let those dry. We'll dry out our brush, and then we'll come back to these for a little white highlight just to finish those off. So got my brush here, my trusty terrain brush, and it's keep that wet, so I can work with it here. And I'm going to go ahead and just make a little blob of gray and blue. So I've got the granite gray. This is apple barrel granite gray, 50 cents a pop at Walmart. Or you could go to your local crafting store and spend more money if you want. Doesn't really matter to me. So I'm just going to use up a big ton of that because I have to slather these in gray. So load on, brush up with a whole bunch there, and I'm going to start off painting these inside pieces here. And I'm going pretty thick because this is a base coat. I don't really want any pink shining through. So I'm kind of going across the whole thing with the gray. And then I'm going kind of up and down to fill in all these nice little textured spots. And that's real good there. We're getting in there. So, the idea is that whether you choose to use these as actual ice, meaning there's no solid form underneath it, it's just frozen liquid, or if you want to say that they're rock pieces that are covered in ice or snow, this light gray, it dries up really, really light, so it'll work really well for either one of those scenarios. And again, this is a huge piece. I don't know that I will ever need it or use it, but I don't have any really big terrain pieces like that, so this kind of could represent multiple things too. Here's something I just thought of. What if I use this as a natural border? So, you know, imagine a setting where a rock formation has occurred, and whoever the residents or denizens of that place, they've decided to use that as a natural defensive barrier. So maybe, you know, maybe it's a barbarian tribe that has kind of set up their camp in the lowlands of, you know, between these two things. Who knows? Sky's the limit. One of the things that I like about doing terrain like this is that it's not scene specific. So it has more than one use. You know, I'm not just going to set it up for one game and then never use it again. The idea would be that I could use it in multiple games and multiple scenarios and multiple genres even. So I'm just going to do the top there. Now, one of the viewers was like, "Bill, why don't you wear gloves?" I probably should wear gloves, but you know, this is acrylic paint, so I can just get messy. And sometimes getting messy feels good. I don't know. Part of the creative process is just like, it could be kind of getting messy, but and you know, while I'm holding this is pulling paint off from the top. That's okay. I'll just go back over it. I'm going to burn through this paint anyway, and here's why. It's this granite gray is an old friend. I've used this on a lot of different projects, from caverns and caves to dungeon tiles. It's a great light gray color to use for doing highlights. So I go through it a lot, and it's pretty cheap. So I'll just use up whatever I got, and I'm not too super worried about that. Now, remember that the cornerstone of crafting is that it doesn't have to be perfect. Crafting terrain is not like painting minis where you have to worry about little incy-bincy details. Crafting terrain is all about just kind of having fun and exploring the process. So I'm going to keep plugging away at this piece. And if you're watching live on Twitch, feel free to follow along, and you can ask questions. And Dave, my producer, director extraordinaire, is also kind of occasionally moderating the comments, and he can use the God voice, which is just a microphone hooked up to a speaker. He can use that to kind of address those questions and let me respond if I can. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, you know, feel free to pause and go fix yourself a cup of coffee or whatever you prefer, depending on what time of day it is. You know, and just relax and enjoy. Take a deep breath. There we go. Sometimes crafting is therapeutic to me. If I've had a rough day at work, kind of like actually today. Real talk, today's been sort of a rough day. Got some bad news at work about a lot of stuff that we've been working hard on. Okay, so I don't want this to be pink on the bottom because I want it to be reversible if for any reason I decide to flip it. So I'm just going to paint the bottom up. And again, I can get sloppy with this, no big deal, because it's terrain, and if I miss a spot, I can go back over it later. So I'm going to hit this and finish this guy up. Real heavy coat here. And then we're just going to string him out to dry. And so that I can work on his brother over here, I'm going to put this up this way. Oh, rip, that didn't work. You know what I'll do? I'll use this big chunk of paint to dry that. All right, item number 2. Moving it along. Slathering on that paint, spread it in, and then do some up and down strokes to kind of make sure we're filling in all those cool little textures that we created using the hot wire foam cutter. And there are a lot of different companies that make those. Mine is like the cheapest. It's like Hot Wire Foam Factory makes it. But Proxon, and there's a bunch of other ones. And you know, sometimes budget is a concern. You know, there's a reason why I'm not just buying the ice caverns from Dwarven Forge. They're really nice. Don't get me wrong, they're gorgeous. But they're expensive, and I don't have the money for that right now. So that's why we're using cheap materials. The other thing, though, that I like about using cheap or recycled materials is that it's cheap and it's recycled. So you can't go wrong with cheap and recycled. Because if you screw up, it's not like you invested a whole boatload of money. So that's another reason why I like working with these kind of materials. You could buy like a whole 4x8 sheet of 2-inch pink foam from your local Home Depot or home improvement store for pretty cheap. And that's like a lifetime supply of pink foam. So I want to say like, you know, $30 or something like that maybe. I don't know if I'm on point with that approximation of cost, but all right, getting to the bottom of this. I'm going to use up every little drop, and then I fortunately have another one. Yes, fill in the paint. Yeah, buddy. Hope you're having a good day today out there in interwebs land. I also want to address another thing. Some people make terrain for games, like it's the crafting DM, right? So you're a DM or a game master, and you make terrain for your table. And I do that, but I have friends who also aren't the DMs, but they like making the terrain and they like crafting, and so they do that just for their own self enjoyment. What's the right word? I don't know. You know, for themselves. They do it because it's relaxing. They do it because it's enjoying. Sometimes, you know, enjoyable. Sometimes people do it because it's challenging, actually. Some people like the challenge. Whatever your reason, I cannot say enough positive things about crafting. Let me tell you about the community, too. When I kind of got into it back in 2015, I started following DM Scotty. And his channel was like my Bible for crafting. You know, it taught me all the interesting little techniques, and I would try out some of his things and put my own spin on it, and eventually got to a point where I was posting my own videos and participating in the crafting community. You know, he had his forums, and there's a Facebook page and all that stuff, and it just ballooned and grew in size, and the community was super friendly and supportive. You know, you'd be a newbie posting there, but you know, people would give you valuable feedback and ideas for, you know, how you can elaborate, and you know, and the whole community was really, be honest with you, the crafting community is what kept me on Facebook, because there was a dark time where I kind of felt like Facebook was just a depressing hole of, you know, debates and people just yelling at each other, and I didn't like it. So I almost quit Facebook, but the crafting community kept me there, gave me a bright, happy place to go to, where, you know, politics and religion didn't really factor in. You know, people just talked about the craft and talked about enjoying games, and so that's like kind of one of those therapeutic things, like I was mentioning. You know, nice place to go where no matter what your politics are or your background or whatever, we all could come together in this love of crafting, this appreciation for creating stuff, and hopefully using it to play and enhance your gameplay experience. And as I've said before, I don't have a really super artistic background. my creative endeavors were always kind of focused on the tech side with film and television. But got into this and, found out that what you enjoy doing, if it's creative, you don't have to be a quote-unquote creative person. What you have to be is open-minded and willing to learn how to do stuff and be not afraid to make mistakes. And that's all it came down to, is just don't be afraid to try something out. And, if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. So, speaking of mistakes, I didn't really leave a lot of space for drying, so I'm going to have to set up more paint bottles to lean these giant pieces up against. There we go. So we've got these two big mama jamas that are based in gray, but while that's still drying, what I'd like to do is take some of this pool blue. This is, again, it's just an apple barrel cheapy guy. I'm just going to drop a couple little droplets on there and mix it in with whatever's left from the gray. So it's going to be kind of a grayish blue. And all I'm going to do is stipple just little chunks of this, right? So boom, 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 boom. Right? Just go along there, boom, boom, boom. Get a little more on there, boom, boom, boom. Oh, it fell. No big deal. You know why? Because crafting is full of wonderful mistakes that happen sometimes. So all I did was just kind of hit those with some blue. They're going to barely show up. I mean, by the time this is done drying, you're barely going to even know that there was ever any blue, and that's okay. So these pieces dried already. They had the gray. Now I'm going to hit them with some blue. I'm just stippling it around. Just kind of poking and stabbing it around. Give it some blue there. Give this guy some blue, bits of blue. Not total coverage, just little stipples, just for little accents. The idea that I'm thinking of, and I don't know if this is scientifically true or not, but in my mind, when you see a big chunk of ice, maybe the blue is actually just picking up color from the sky. So like if you look at it a certain way, it looks more blue than it does white. That's kind of where I was going with this. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but that's okay. So while those dudes are drying, I will now prepare for the highlight coat, because these other three pieces that I originally started with have enough layering of color to where I feel like I can now go ahead and do the highlight. So remember, people, that highlighting is about a dry brush technique. Dry brush, which means this brush cannot be wet. I just cleaned it out, but I have to make sure it's dry. So I'm going to take this paper towel here. I'm going to squeeze it out, squeeze out the water. Yeah. And then I'm just going to you hear that? It's like an ASMR video. Now I'm just going to wipe off this brush. I'm going to get all the moisture out of there. Okay, so now I can dry brush. So what I'm going to do for my dry brush is take this Snow White, apple barrel Snow White, give it a shake, drop some down over here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is load up this paintbrush with the white. So it's full of white, but then guess what? Then I'm going to wipe it off. I know that seems counterintuitive, but it works. So now I'm going to kind of almost like I'm erasing it off the brush. I'm going to get all that white off the brush. So there's just a little bit there. Now here's where the magic's going to come in. Okay, so here's my guy, right? Here's my piece. And I'm going to go against the grain. So it's up and down striations. I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm just going to hit these little peaks. Hit these little peaks, okay? And I'm holding this so loosely that it could almost fall out of my hands. And I'm just gonna go across the grain, and I'm looking to pick up these highlights, these white pieces, okay? So if you can see this right here, all these little kind of ribbed pieces, I'm just going kind of across the grain. pick up the things that are sticking out. It's picking up all the cool little textures. Now what I'll do on the top is also go along the top. So I'm on about a 45-degree angle, and I'm just going across this top rim right there. I'll flip it, load up some more paint, wipe it off, and then I'm going to do the same on this side. Hitting that white. Now this is supposed to be snow terrain, so it's okay if I go a little heavy on the white. Not too heavy, I want to dry brush it though, but heavy enough where I'm picking up the white, because this is supposed to be kind of an Arctic, tundra, frozen kind of terrain. Okay, so I'm going to definitely hit along the sides here. Boom, 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 boom. So the last bit that I'm going to do, I'm going to load up this with some white, and I'm going to stipple. I'm not dry brushing, this is actually stippling. So I'm just kind of poking and stabbing across the top. I imagine that this is where the snow is living, okay? I want it to have some texture. I want some gray poking through, but I want to make very clear that this is where the snow is living. And whatever's left on the brush, I'll just go around and give it one more good coat of white to dry brush it out. Now, this guy's done. So here as a comparison, right, that's a finished piece right there. And now I can look at it critically and say there's too much blue here. No problem. Remember I said anything can be fixed? I'm just going to go in over the blue. I'm going to overbrush the blue with more white because snow may be settled in there, okay? If I don't like that, boom. Like I don't like this weird tip that I have right here. So I'm going to overbrush with more white. Okay. Now this piece has some really great texture. So I'm going to, just like I showed you before, I'm just going to brush across, pick up those highlights. Can you see that coming through? Yes, right there. And again, doesn't have to be perfect, because if I don't like it, I can just layer over it. But I'm going to hit this up with the white, pick up those highlights, and really give it some texture and some frozen kind of vibes going on to it. Okay, and then we'll work around this side. Yes. Okay, so same thing. Gonna dry brush this guy, wipe it off. So just like anything, speed will come as you get your technique down. You could go real slow if you want, just nice and gentle, and just go across those textures. Or you can go faster once you get your feeling and your sense of how to control the brush. I'm not a big fan of having to do things fast, because I think that this process is more about creativity. So I'm going to go ahead and hit all these edges. Remember how we want to hit the top edges. Highlighting for light motivation kind of means like, where's the light coming from? And that's a big part of what gives texture more dimensionality, more realism. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit all these top edges, just going along there, flicking it at about a 45-degree angle. Beautiful, coming together, man, look at that. Now, I still want to get this top. And if you remember from that first piece, I'm going to load up the paint on the brush. I'm going to blot some of it off, but not all of it. I want it to actually have some paint. And then I'm going to actually stipple along the top. So here we go. There we go. Nice. So a little bit of the gray and the blue poking through, but I've made it look like there's nice kind of snow coverage across the top of this piece. So that's another one done. And the last one has a ton of great texture. So I'm going to go ahead and load up some paint on here and get to the dry brushing. Oh man, that's just beautiful how that comes through there. Look at that. Look at that. Really looks nice. I need a little more paint, so I'm going to go ahead and drop a little bit in there. Load up my brush. Dry brush it off. And just lightly go against the grain there. Lightly going against the grain. Yeah, look at that. Man, that's cool. You know, and if there's a little too much blue poking through, that's okay. Just go up and down a little bit. But otherwise, I'm feeling this. This looks great. Looks absolutely wonderful. Okay, now over on this side. Got some great textures up here. Yep. Just going to go ahead and hit those up. Get my snow and ice coverage across there. Dry brush that off. Now look at that. So there's this bluish grayish edge right there. I'm just going to drag across real lightly and hit those highlights. Look at how they just pop right out. They've just been hiding there all along, waiting for somebody to come and show them how to look. That's it, man, right there. Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same across the top. I'm going to do my stippling technique here. Load up the paint. And just stipple, 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 stipple. Give it some snow, fresh snow coverage. Yep. There we go. Man, this is going to be so cool. I'm excited to reveal this at the table. And again, you know, that's the thing. The beautiful thing about terrain is that it can inspire adventures. You can actually get ideas from the terrain. The terrain will help you tell the story. You know, here I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, you know, I'm just imagining if they had to traverse a whole bunch of these kind of pieces, you know, and it was kind of like a zigzag pattern, you know, across a frozen lake, and they couldn't bear the weight on the lake, so they had to kind of, you know, make their way from one chunk to another, these floating things. Or maybe they're actually rock, and they almost make like a natural labyrinth, you know, and you line them up in different ways, and they have to kind of make their way through this labyrinth, and there's an ambush, you know, or maybe they come across the cave of a Yeti or something like that. So many cool options. All right, so these little guys, they're dry. They have the blue and the gray, so let's hit them up. While we're doing all of our highlights, let's hit them up. So load up that nice white, dry brush it off, and then we'll go ahead and hit this. Yes, 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 yes. These paint up real fast because they're little. And sometimes little pieces are great to have on the table because they give you a little more options. You know, they're not as much structure. So I'm just going to go through and hit those highlights, get those edges. Boom, 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 boom. Yes. You know what? I'll get the bottoms of these too in case I ever want to flip them and use them. That's it for that guy. Done. Easy, easy. Easy peasy. Do the top, do the bottom. Wipe some of that off. I always love doing the highlight because it's like that coat where everything kind of comes together at last. I got a growing table full of terrain. Okay, the two big guys are, there's still little damp spots here and there, but that's okay. It's okay, they're dry enough. We're going to call them dry enough. And if I do accidentally blend some white into something else, no big deal. So this is a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to load this brush up, sponge it off, and then start hitting these highlights. Ready for this? This is exciting. Now that inner side is very wet still, so I'm going to flip it to the outer side here. Yes. Man alive, that is cool. That is cool and the gang. Right there, bringing it together. Those highlights are really bringing it together. And you just see that gray and that white just poking through, and it's just so cool. Just so cool to see those textures, you know? Kind of like these natural formations of where the water, you know, melted and then reformed and stuff like that. You got so many cool options there. Okay. Now, I can do this top part. I can blot away at the top and the bottom. Just boom, boom, boom. Stipple across there. Stipple, stipple. Slapping some white paint on because it's gonna look dope. I can't wait to use these in an adventure. There we go, man. That looks cool. Cool. Cool, 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 cool. All right, so I'm just gonna dust across here. Might still be too wet. It is. So what's happening is, because this is too wet, as I'm trying to dry brush it, it's pulling gray off. So I'm gonna that's just gonna have to continue to dry, and you'll have to trust me that it's finished someday, because I'm not gonna make a whole nother video just for these two pieces. But you'll see them on the table. You'll see them on the table if you watch any of the shows. That could be D&D with high school students. It could be any other shows that we produce on the channel. Could be the Bard's Tale. Our buddies over at Initiative Coffee Company might be doing something with an Arctic setting. Who knows? But when you see them on the table, you'll know. You'll be like, hey, I watched him make those. That was a groovy series right there. But anyway, in closing, I'll just say thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for following. And I hope you got a little something out of this. And remember, don't be afraid to try your own thing. And if it doesn't work out the right way the first time, don't give up. Just keep going, because all those sayings that you grew up with are true. Practice makes perfect, and you know, failure can often lead to success and all that kind of stuff. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. All right, thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out a lot of the other great content that I have on the channel. It's really awesome. You should check it out. I know what I'm talking about.